From horror legend Wes Craven comes the 1984 horror classic that not only revolutionized supernatural slasher movies, but one that made an entire generation of horror movie watching kids afraid to fall asleep. Let's dive in to Wes Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street.
You okay, Tina?
Just a dream, Ma.
Some dream, judging from that.
A Nightmare on Elm Street is inarguably a juggernaut of a film in the world of not just horror cinema, but cinema in general. It skyrocketed Wes Craven's career to new heights, popularized Robert Englund on a mainstream level, introduced the world to Johnny Depp, and brought forth an entirely new cinematic boogeyman to haunt an all-new wave of 80s moviegoers, in the same way Michael Myers had just a few years prior, and in the same way Jason Voorhees still was. Well, at least up until his supposed death a few months prior to the release of this film. But this boogeyman wasn't some guy walking down the street with a knife, nor was he an angered, manic hillbilly from the hills of some New Jersey campground. This boogeyman was badly burned, wore a dirty hat, a grungy Christmas sweater, brandished a crude glove with razor-sharp knives attached, and killed you in your dreams.
Actually, they were more like finger knives or something he'd made himself. But they made a horrible sound. It was like, scream. Nancy, you dreamed about the same creep I did.
That's impossible.
This boogeyman's name was Freddy Krueger. Unprecedented in the annals of villainy, the emergence of Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street marked an unparalleled malevolence. While certain elements of their narrative can be traced back to actual occurrences, such as instances of individuals perishing in their slumber due to fear-induced insomnia, and even Wes Craven himself witnessing a disquieting figure outside his childhood window, the character of Freddy Krueger truly transcended any known archetype. Conceived within the imaginative depths of Wes Craven's mind, Freddy Krueger was unleashed upon the world with the release of A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Please, God.
This is God.
The storyline of A Nightmare on Elm Street revolves around a group of teenagers hailing from the Midwest, ensnared by the clutches of the dream demon, Freddy Krueger, superbly portrayed by Robert Englund. This disfigured nocturnal predator preys upon and brings about the demise of adolescents in their dreamscapes, which subsequently results in their actual demise in the real world. Nancy Thompson, played by Heather Langenkamp, upon delving into this perplexing phenomenon, starts suspecting that a dark town secret, concealed by her parents and those of her friends, holds the key to unraveling the mystery. As the film progresses, revelations come to light, shedding insight into the history of Freddy Krueger, while Nancy devises a means to vanquish the weathered dream demon once and for all. However, it remains a possibility that this supposed triumph is not all it seems. A Nightmare on Elm Street draws inspiration from diverse sources, incorporating Wes Craven's personal experiences from his childhood and various articles published by the LA Times concerning refugees who tragically passed away in their sleep following distressing nightmares. The character of Freddy Krueger also finds its origins in the aforementioned elderly man whom Craven witnessed near his residence, peering up into his childhood bedroom window, as well as a bully from his formative years. Initially, Craven's creative spark ignited while observing a student film project at Clarkson University, a parody of contemporary horror films. Nevertheless, his creative process also drew upon Eastern spiritual traditions and the popular song Dreamweaver by Gary Wright. Originally intended to depict a child molester, Krueger's character was altered to exclusively emphasize child murder, thus avoiding the exploitation of real-life cases involving child molestation. In selecting Krueger's attire, Craven opted for a red and green sweater after reading a Scientific American article stating that these two colors were the most visually jarring to the human eye. While contemplating Krueger's weapon of choice, Craven initially considered a sickle, but ultimately opted for the famous glove embellished with steak knives. Initially, David Warner was chosen to portray Freddy Krueger, but he had to withdraw from the project due to conflicting schedules. Kane Hodder was also in the running for the part. However, after struggling to find an actor who could embody the necessary ferocity, Wes Craven ultimately selected Robert Englund. Despite Englund not being Craven's initial preference due to his shorter stature and what was described as baby fat on his face, he managed to captivate the director during auditions with his willingness to delve into dark emotional depths. Englund's agent, Joe Rice, proposed portraying the character as, quote, rodent-like, and, quote, weasel-like during his audition, which Englund accomplished by smudging cigarette ash beneath his eyes and slicking back his hair. With the remaining members of the cast fully portrayed by the perpetually awesome John Saxon as Nancy's father, Ronnie Blakely as Nancy's mother, Johnny Depp as Nancy's romantic interest, his inaugural cinematic role no less, Amanda Weiss as Tina Gray, as well as Nick Corey as Rod and Lynn Shay as the instructor in a brief but significant scene, the acting prowess on display within the runtime of A Nightmare on Elm Street guarantees a captivating experience, although a bit collectively cheesy at times. Principal photography for Nightmare on Elm Street commenced on June 11, 1984, encompassing a span of 32 days in and around the Los Angeles, California area. Various shooting locations were utilized, including John Marshall High School for the depiction of high school scenes, the Lincoln Heights Jail for sequences set in the boiler room and police station, the Cahuenga Branch Library for the exterior shots of the police station, and Evergreen Cemetery for the burial scene of Rod. The Kotjaw Institute for the Study of Sleep Disorders was filmed at the American Jewish University on Mulholland Drive. Throughout production, more than 500 gallons of artificial blood were employed, and special effects were skillfully utilized to bring forth specific moments, such as the eruption of blood and the liquefying staircase. Originally, Wes Craven intended for the film to conclude with Nancy awakening and realizing that the entire ordeal had merely been a nightmare. However, Robert Shea, the head of New Line Cinema, insisted on a surprising conclusion. Consequently, the film crew filmed multiple variations of the ending, ultimately settling on the version in which Freddy drags Nancy's mother through the doorway, a twist ending that laid the groundwork for a franchise. Filming wrapped up at the end of July, and the film saw its release in November of 1984. The first Nightmare on Elm Street movie, for me, is one of those franchise starters that, while extremely enjoyable, is simply dwarfed by later films in the series. Not that it's not great in its own right, but when you put Nightmare 1 up against the likes of Dream Warriors or even The Dream Master, it's hard to not feel a little antsy when watching Part 1, when you know damn well how awesome the series is going to get down the road. It's a very similar situation to the one with Friday the 13th. Part 1 is great in its own right, and stands on its own as a damn good slasher movie, but when you put it up there next to The Final Chapter or Jason Lives, the original film just doesn't compare. So, while the original Nightmare on Elm Street gave us final girl Nancy Thompson, a killer original score, some truly insane dream sequences, and of course, introduced us all to the razor glove wearing madman Freddy Krueger, played in glorious fashion by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Robert Englund, I think I'd rather watch part 2, 3, 4, or 5 any day of the week over the original. And again, that's not meant to take away from the original in any way, but more so to illustrate how crazy and insane and good the franchise continued to get after the first film. What can't be denied about the first film, however, is some of its truly creepy and sometimes even bizarre moments that seemingly come out of nowhere. The goat running across the hallway, seeing Tina's corpse in the body bag, little shots and nuances about the original film that add to the film's overall dreamscape quality that don't necessarily make sense from the standpoint of linear reality, but make perfect sense considering how bizarre and confusing dreams and nightmares can be. As an introduction to the world of Springwood and the boogeyman that is Freddy Krueger, A Nightmare on Elm Street does a great job with both. Although the town seems a bit more fleshed out in later films, and considering this is a franchise, that should be expected. Springwood is really showcased as this quiet, small, Midwestern town that is somewhat normal seeming on the surface, but definitely has a weird sense of looming dread and dark mystery lying just beneath that surface, as if the whole town is aware of its own dirty little secret, except for the kids, which is basically what actually happens within the plot itself when Nancy's mom reveals to her what they did to Freddy Krueger, after what he was doing to the children of Springwood. Freddy himself is as creepy and unhinged as you'd ever want him to be. Not as scary as he would be in some of the films down the road, or as cartoony as some of the films down the road, but pure Freddy Krueger in all of his glorious goodness. The makeup is good, the voice is good, although not super deep as it would appear from part 2 onwards. But Robert Englund physically makes the role as creepy and as weird as possible, and you just truly believe that this burned, psychopathic dream demon child killer is a real person, not just Robert Englund in makeup. A Nightmare on Elm Street is a great beginning to the long-running Freddy Krueger saga. The story is simple yet delicious, John Saxon is always a badass, the rest of the cast all did a great job, some more than others. The original score is atmospheric and creepy. There's just not much to not love about this movie, and there is simply no denying how insane of a job Robert Englund did with the character of Freddy Krueger. The film created an entirely new horror icon that hasn't seemed to wane in popularity one bit since his first appearance on movie screens all the way back in November 1984, and that is impressive. And let us not forget the fantastically moody original score by Charles Bernstein, as well as the now infamous Freddy theme song, which took the downbeat vibe of the film to an entirely new level. I'm going to say that Wes Craven's 1984 horror epic, A Nightmare on Elm Street, is a masterpiece.